Tour the cruise ports, Astoria.
Table of contents, Astoria.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney at earthlink.net. 2022.
Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltov. For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link at the last chapter. Chapter 4. Introduction to Astoria.
The city of Astoria is near the mouth of the Columbia River where it empties into the Pacific Ocean.
Here is Astoria in Oregon, near the Pacific Ocean.
Astoria is on the Columbia River, about 60 miles west of Portland.
This again shows Astoria on the Columbia River, 60 miles west of Portland.
Astoria is on a broad estuary of the Columbia River.
This is a map of Astoria showing some of the principal points of interest. Here is a view of Astoria and the bridge across the river, connecting it to the state of Washington on the north side of the river.
This shows the modern-day port area of Astoria. Here is a view of the Astoria-Megla Bridge that goes across the Columbia River between Astoria and Point Ellis near Megla, Washington. The bridge is 4.1 miles, 6.6 kilometers long. The Astoria-Megla Bridge is part of US South Highway 101, which runs from the Mexican border in California up to the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. It was the last completed segment of US Route 101 between Olympia, Washington, and Los Angeles, California.
The Astoria-Megla Bridge is a steel cantilever-through truss bridge that spans the Columbia River. It is located 14 miles, 23 kilometers, from the mouth of the river.
The Astoria-Megla Bridge is the longest continuous truss bridge in North America. This is a view of Astoria and the Columbia River. This is another view of Astoria and the Columbia River. This is a view of Astoria, the Columbia River, and the Pacific Ocean in the distance.
Located on the south shore of the Columbia, the city is served by the Port of Astoria with a deep water port.
This is the Port of Astoria.
Transportation includes the Astoria Regional Airport, with US Route 30 and US Route 101 as the main highways, and the Astoria-Megla Bridge connecting to neighboring Washington across the river.
The population of Astoria is 10,000.
Chapter 5. The History of Astoria.
The Lewis and Clark expedition spent the winter of 1805 to 1806 at Fort Clatsop, a small log structure south and west of modern-day Astoria.
This shows the route of the Lewis and Clark expedition from St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean in Fort Clatsop. The expedition had hoped a ship would come by to take them back east, but instead endured a torturous winter of rain and cold, then returned east the way they came. Today the fort has been recreated and is part of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Park. This shows the location of Fort Clatsop in the Lewis and Clark National Historic Park, a few miles south of Astoria. This is a replica of the original Fort Clatsop.
Replica of cabin interior at Fort Clatsop.
This is a Fort Clatsop scene in a painting by Newman Mira. This is from William Clark's journal dated November 20, 1805. One of the Indians had on a robe made of 2 sea otter skins. The fur of them were more beautiful than any fur I had ever seen. Both Captain Lewis and myself endeavored to purchase the robe with different articles. At length we procured it for a belt of blue beads which Sacagawea wore around her waist.
This is a replica of the original Fort Clatsop.
This is a replica of the original Fort Clatsop. Chapter 6. Fort Astoria.
5 years later, in 1810, John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company sent the Astor expedition that founded Fort Astoria as its primary fur trading post in the Northwest.
Fort Astoria was an extremely important post for American exploration of the continent, and was influential in establishing American claims to the Pacific Northwest. Fort Astoria was, in fact, the first permanent U.S. settlement on the Pacific coast.
This map shows fur trade routes, showing Astoria on the Columbia River as a major fur trade depot.
Fort Astoria was named after the American investor and first millionaire, John Jacob Astor. John Jacob Astor, who lived from 1763 to 1848, was born Johann Jacob Astor. He was a German-American businessman, merchant, fur trader, and investor who was the first prominent member of the Astor family and the first multimillionaire in the United States. He was the creator of the first trust in the United States. He emigrated to England as a teenager and worked as a musical instrument manufacturer.
Astor moved to the United States after the American Revolutionary War. He entered the fur trade and built a monopoly, managing a business empire that extended to the Great Lakes region and Canada, and later expanded into the American West and Pacific coast. Seeing the decline of demand, he got out of the fur trade in 1830, diversifying by investing in New York City real estate and later becoming a famed patron of the arts. This shows the location of the Fort Astoria at the Heritage Museum.
Astor's Fur Trading Company founded Fort Astoria at the site of present-day Astoria in 1810. Astoria was incorporated in 1876.
This is the reconstructed blockhouse of Fort Astoria.
The British took over Fort Astoria in 1813 during the War of 1812, and Astor then sold it to the Northwest Company, a rival of the Hudson's Bay Company, the dominant fur traders in the Northwest and Canada.
Fort Astoria was then renamed Fort George in honor of King George III.
Fort George became an important port of call for the maritime fur trade in 1821. The Northwest Company was merged into the Hudson's Bay Company, which took ownership of the fort. Fort George was the company's main depot in the region until Fort Vancouver was completed in 1825, and was then abandoned.
Washington Irving described the fur traders as Sinbads of the wilderness, and their venture was a staging point for the spread of American economic power into both the continental interior and into the Pacific.
Astor's Pacific Fur Company failed, however, and the fort and fur trade were sold to the British in 1813. The fort was restored to the U.S. in 1818, though the fur trade would remain under British control until American pioneers following the Oregon Trail began filtering into the port town in the mid-1840s.
This is a map of the old Oregon Trail as it existed from 1852 to 1906.
As the Oregon Territory grew and became increasingly more settled, Astoria likewise grew as a port city at the mouth of the Great River that provided the easiest access to the interior.
The first U.S. post office west of the Rocky Mountains was established in Astoria in 1847.
In 1853, the northern part of the Oregon Territory was organized as the Washington Territory, which included the present-day state of Washington, as well as the northern third of Idaho, and a small portion of western Montana. In 1859, Oregon became a state. The state of Oregon, however, did not include all of the previous Oregon Territory. The remaining part was joined to Washington Territory.
Washington did not become a state until 30 years later, in 1889.
Chapter 7. Astoria.
In 1876, the community of Astoria was legally incorporated.
Astoria attracted a host of immigrants beginning in the late 19th century. Scandinavian settlers, primarily Finns, became significant parts of the population. The Finns mostly lived in Uniontown, near the present-day end of the Astoria-Megler Bridge, and took fishing jobs.
This is the Suomi Hall, the meeting hall of Finnish and Scandinavian immigrants, under the Astoria-Megler Bridge.
The Chinese also soon became significant parts of the population and worked in the canneries.
This is Astoria in 1904.
This again is Astoria in 1904.
In 1883, downtown Astoria was devastated by fee, partly because it was mostly wood and entirely raised off the marshy ground on pilings.
The downtown area was rebuilt, again mostly of wood and raised off the marshy ground on pilings in 1922. Downtown Astoria was devastated by fire, and again the flames spread quickly again, as collapsing streets took out the water system. Frantic citizens resorted to dynamite, blowing up entire buildings to stop the fire from going further.
Astoria has served as a port of entry for over a century and remains the trading center for the lower Columbia Basin, although it has long since been eclipsed by Portland and Seattle as an economic hub on the coast of the Pacific Northwest.
Astoria's economy centered around fishing, fish processing, and lumber. In 1945, about 30 canneries could be found along the Columbia.
However, in 1974 Bumblebee Seafood moved its headquarters out of Astoria, and gradually reduced its presence until 1980 when the company closed its last Astoria cannery. The timber industry also declined, and the Astoria Plywood Mill, the city's largest employer, closed in 1989. In 1966, the Astoria-Megler Bridge was opened. It completed U.S. Route 101 and linked Astoria with Washington on the opposite shore of the Columbia.
Today, tourism, Astoria's growing art scene, and light manufacturing are the main economic activities of the city. It is also a port of call for cruise ships, with over 20 ships scheduled in recent years.
Chapter 8. Astoria Points of Interest.
In addition to the replicated Fort Clatsop, a popular point of interest is the Astoria Column. It is a tower 125 feet, or 38 meters high, built atop the hill above the town. It has an inner circular staircase allowing visitors to climb to see a view of the town, the surrounding lands, and the Columbia River.
This shows the location of the Astoria Column.
The column was built by the Asto family in 1926 to commemorate the region's early history.
The Flavel House Museum is in a historic 1885 Queen Anne-style Victorian home.
Its period furnishings enable visitors to imagine what life was like in Astoria at the turn of the 20th century.
The decorative exterior, with hipped roof, balconies and verandas, and its three-story octagon tower, has been restored to original form. The mansion's large rooms with their elegant woodwork are accented by furnishings and decorations of a century ago.
This shows the location of the Flavel House Museum.
The Columbia River Maritime Museum is a museum of maritime history 10 miles, 16 kilometers from the mouth of the Columbia River in Astoria.
This shows the location of the Columbia River Maritime Museum. The Columbia River Maritime Museum is the official state maritime museum for Oregon. It has a national reputation for the quality of its exhibits and the scope of its collections.
The Columbia River Maritime Museum collects and exhibits maritime artifacts from the Columbia River and the Pacific Northwest.
The Columbia River Maritime Museum was founded in 1962. It houses interactive historical exhibits and museum acquisitions.
Large windows make the Columbia River a backdrop for interactive exhibits.
Visitors may experience what it is like to pilot a tugboat, participate in a Coast Guard rescue on the Columbia River Bar, and to live in Astoria during the height of salmon fishing.
Chapter 9. The Columbia River Bar.
There are many exhibits in the museum about the Columbia Bar, also called the Columbia River Bar. The Columbia River Bar is a system of bars and shoals at the mouth of the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. It is about 3 miles, 5 kilometers, wide and 6 miles, 10 kilometers, long.
The bar is where the fast-flowing Columbia meets the Pacific Ocean and drops its load of sediment, building up a shallow sandbar. The combination of the shallow bar and the turbulent water where the river meets the ocean makes for hazardous navigation.
The Columbia current ranges from 4 to 7 knots westward, and therefore into the predominantly westerly winds and ocean swells, producing treacherous waters.
The Columbia River does not have a delta region where the force of the water is diffused and spread out into several distributaries, as in the case of the Mississippi River and other major rivers. Instead, the current is focused like a fire hose directly into the ocean, where the prevailing wind comes from the west.
Conditions can change from calm to life-threatening in as little as 5 minutes due to changes of direction of wind and ocean swell.
Since 1792, approximately 2,000 large ships have sunk in and around the Columbia Bar. Because of the danger and the numerous shipwrecks, the mouth of the Columbia River acquired a reputation worldwide as the graveyard of the Pacific.
This dramatic exhibit at the Columbia River Maritime Museum shows the Coast Guard making a rescue at the Columbia Bar.
Chapter 10. Other Astoria Sites.
The Heritage Museum of the Clatsop County Historical Society features permanent exhibits interpreting Clatsop County's history, including natural history, geology, Native American artifacts, early immigrants and settlers of the region, and important nautical events.
The building contains over 10,000 catalogued historic photographs.
This shows the location of the Heritage Museum. The Astoria Riverfront Trolley is a restored 1914 trolley that runs for 3 miles along the Columbia River in Astoria. The conductor of the Astoria Riverfront Trolley provides an interpretation of the area's history and attractions. The trolley can be boarded anywhere on the riverfront between Basin and 36th Streets. The round trip takes about 40 minutes, and you can ride as long as you like for $1.
The old Clatsop County Jail is now home to the Oregon Film Museum. Astoria was the setting of the 1985 movie The Goonies, which was filmed on location.
The Oregon Film Museum celebrates the art and legacy of films and filmmaking in the state of Oregon.
Since The Fisherman's Bride, in 1908, Oregon has been used in such classics as The General, The Great Race, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Paint Your Wagon, Animal House, Kindergarten Cop, and The Goonies. Some refer to Oregon as Hollywood North. Chapter 11. Climate of Astoria. Will it be hot, or will it be cold in Astoria? Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Astoria. We see that summers are cool with high temperatures only in the mid to high 60s. Winters are moderate with highs near 50 and lows in the high 30s. Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Astoria. Here is the average monthly rainfall in inches throughout the year in Astoria. We see that the rainy season is from October through April. Here is the average number of days with rainfall throughout the year in Astoria. We see that it rains slightly more than half of the days in a year in the rainiest months of December and January. It rains 2 days out of 3. Chapter 12. Recommended videos, Astoria.
Astoria, Oregon, an adventure in history.
13 best things to do in Astoria, Oregon.
Top 17 tourist attractions in Astoria, Travel Oregon.
YouTube navigation.
Chapter 13. Table of Contents, Astoria.
To play or pause the video, select the appropriate icon, or press the K key or the space bar.
The right and left arrow keys will advance or retard the video by 5 seconds, respectively, in both the play and pause modes.
If you see this in the upper right corner of the video, and you select the left mouse button, it will give you a list of recommended videos or a playlist of related videos. If you select this arrow and then exit the full screen, you will see a display of the chapters like this example. This is the listing of the first 6 chapters, and by scrolling down, you can see the rest of the chapters.
For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link here.
Thanks for watching.